Welcome. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Why don't we get started? I'd like to welcome everybody to this amazing event. And you see the title, Powering the Brain, Metabolism, and Mental Health. And this is going to be a wonderful session. I am Trevor Young. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the provost at University of Toronto. But more relevant perhaps to tonight is I'm a psychiatrist and I've worked in bipolar disorder through my life, and started out looking at mitochondrial abnormalities in bipolar patients in postmortem brain quite a long time ago. Made a few findings there, and then the smartest thing I ever did was made sure to surround myself with amazing colleagues and teams, and I happened to have the honor of having Andreazza join my lab, and as you'll see, it's been a remarkable career trajectory for her. I think what's so wonderful about tonight is that what we're talking about is what we are plagued with in psychiatry is having lots of biological findings, but then it not leading to any treatment or any impact. It's like it's a great finding, suggests the pathway could be X, Y, and Z. And here we have an example of a finding which is now turned into a therapeutic possibility. Pretty drastic and interesting therapeutic approach, but something which is really, really important. I'd just like to say a few words about University of Toronto. Those of you who are joining us from various parts of the world, welcome to Toronto and welcome to University of Toronto. We're really proud of our city and we're really proud of our university. And our university, we have a very strong psychiatry department. We have wonderful partner hospitals, CAMH, and among others. I'm a psychiatrist at CAMH, so I have to say that. And we've also got a lot of interest in interdisciplinary science. And this project, you're going to hear, Anna's project is really about how we've done that. I'd like to acknowledge also that the Mito2I Foundation, and under Anna's leadership, received a large grant for $24 million from the National Frontiers in Research Fund. This was a national competition, 6 across the whole country and 2 at University of Toronto, and the biggest one went to Anna for this work, which you'll hear about as we go forward. I'd like to really thank all of our sponsors tonight, SOBP, thank you very much, as well as Mito2I, as well as OBI, and I believe the Bazooki Group as well. Thank you all for making this possible. It's really wonderful. Let me end by just mentioning that this will be a wonderful evening, and we're hosted by somebody who's got 2 wonderful skills, who I've just met, J.D. Schramm, who's come to us from California. He's an expert professor in communications, taught at leading institutions, currently at UCSC, but previously at Stanford and before that. And he also has lived experience suffering from a mood disorder and going through the terrible experience of making a suicide attempt. And as I said, luckily came out the other side and is here with us tonight. So I can't think of anybody better to moderate what will be an interesting discussion. So I'll get off the stage and let that get started, but thank you all for coming here and look forward to the evening. Thank you.
Let my panelists take their assigned seats. And Trevor, thank you so much for the introduction, but also for just the leadership at University of Toronto that allows an event like this to be well hosted and well produced. We are delighted to be here. And I am so thrilled to see everybody who is here in the room with us and about to have a fascinating conversation with the 3 new friends that are seated to my right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and mostly what we want to be able to have is a rich conversation about powering the brain, metabolism, and mental health. So I will just briefly introduce, you heard a little bit about her earlier as well, Andreazza. Her title is listed there at University of Toronto, and it has the home team advantage for the debate we're about to unfold here.
Go UFT.
And when I was talking to her before the event, actually all three of you have an interesting, like, unexpected arrival on the stage at this point in your career. But Anna really began in pharmacy and looking at pharmacology and recognized that the field of mitochondria and the field of pharmacology were often ones that were very far apart. And in a Q&A as a student, just asking a curious question, she saw that there was a way to bridge those two fields into the field that has now become her life's work. And we are delighted to have you here hosting us in this conversation. Seated immediately to her right is Iain Campbell. Iain is the only speaker on the stage who I knew prior to this panel. I've had the pleasure of working with him in his role as a Bazooki Research Fellow and helping him prepare for some of the talks that he's delivered. He comes to us from the University of Edinburgh, so he gets the long distance award for the stage. I don't know that you get it for the room. We'll find that out later. And much like myself, he came to the field with a lived experience of bipolar type 2 and has been able to take that lived experience into his research and make a real difference for other people who struggle with that. And seated at the far right, Dr. Dost Öngür, as you can see from his bio, Harvard Medical School and working at McLean Hospital. He shared with me, hopefully not confidentially, because I'm about to tell all of them, that he was originally going to be a neuroscientist, but the allure of the clinical work drew him into psychiatry. And so all three of you have a remarkable body of work. You represent wonderful institutions and great bodies of research. And so we're going to look today at the topic of metabolism and mental health. And I think as we do that, I think the best place for us to begin is to spill the water on this table all across the iPad that they gave me. There will be a chance for audience questions. There will be a couple of different ways that you can do that. There is a QR code the size of a drive-in movie theater that you can, if you think of questions that you want to ask, this is great, grab it on your phone. You can drop questions in there. Or if you're more of an analog individual, we have index cards and golf pencils. So you can, I don't know if they're pencils or pens, but we have ways that you can handwrite questions or you can send questions in. We're going to spend about the first half of our conversation with me posing questions, and then we'll take some audience questions. And I think the best place for us to begin is to really define some of the terms for the conversation. And at the very start, I think we need to agree on what we mean when we say metabolic health. Anna, you and I were having a conversation a few minutes ago. Can you just kick off what we feel should be the working definition of metabolic health, and why does it get so confused?
Well, thank you everyone for being here first. Thank you, Gigi, for hosting us and making sure that it is going to be a fun event. That's the most important thing. I promise to not spill the water on your iPad. I will try at least. Metabolic health is a field that often actually we perhaps confuse with metabolic pills that we will take and will change our metabolism. My perspective of metabolic health is actually taking the time to actually do the work, to use your life experience to actually change your metabolism to a long, health living life with a good metabolism. So that's one way for us to look of a lot of things we're going to be discussing today when we say metabolic health is a long journey that starts in very different ways for very different people, but all of us can actually have better metabolic health, independent whether we have a mental health or not having a mental health. We all can experience a better metabolic health, and we all have the opportunity to actually enhance of our health. So I like to see the word health saying more, because we can improve our brain health by improving our metabolic health by improving our living health. And as you will hopefully agree with me in the end, by caring by your mitochondria, you're caring by yourself, but you're caring for each other, you're caring for the future of society.
So many of us lay people consider metabolism to be like eye color or left-handed versus right-handed, that it's not something we have control over. But what I'm hearing, and by the nods I'm seeing from the gentleman to your right, that we do have a role, we can play a role in our metabolic health.
We can.
It's not pre-coded for us.
Some are,
Okay.
and even if pre-coded, there are things you can do to improve your metabolic health because you can bypass whatever is being pre-coded. Does that make sense?
It does, and we'll get more into how we do that. Any edits to her working definition?
I wouldn't dare. That was fantastic.
Okay. Wouldn't dare. I love that.
I think you should dare.
So, Dost, I'm going to toss the next definition to you, and then we'll see if they want to edit too. Can you define for us brain metabolism?
Sure. So brain metabolism is a part of our overall metabolic health. All the cells in our bodies need energy to do work, whether that's your muscle cells. If you need to, go for a run, you actually burn some energy. And the brain actually burns energy to do its work. And that's, broadly speaking, where brain metabolism comes in. As it happens, the brain actually burns a lot of energy. Gram for gram, the brain is one of the most energy-hungry organs in our bodies. The only one that comes close is the heart. And the heart's literally a pump that never stops, right? It's always pumping blood. So the brain is actually rivaling the heart in how much energy it needs. And where is that energy going? What is that metabolism for? Most of it is actually to keep the basic background ongoing activity of the brain current. So the brain is doing lots of different things, but estimates are 85% of all of the energy in the brain is actually going to just the neuronal communication, the basic work of the brain. There is nothing fancy about it. So the brain actually needs a lot of energy, but it needs that energy not to do anything special other than just when you open your eyes and you start your day and your brain is actually burning all of that energy.
Excellent, excellent. And then I didn't set you up for this in advance, Iain, but can you give us a working, any edits to his definition? Did he capture all of it?
We won't dare.
Okay. Could you define for us supercalifragilisticexpialidocious in both Scottish and English and French, because we're
I can't pronounce consonants in Scottish.
When we use the phrase metabolic disorders, what fall in that category of metabolic disorders?
So metabolism and energy is fundamental to every organ system of the body, and this is how you live your life, is through your heart beating, through your brain function working, and all of these organs can be affected by metabolic dysfunctions. So you can have impairments of energy and metabolism, and these express as different conditions in the body. So if you have an impairment of metabolism in the brain, it might be something like dementia, Parkinson's. If you have an impairment in the heart, you can have cardiometabolic diseases. So energy is important in every aspect of the body, and metabolic dysfunction can therefore affect every part of the body.
And any specific examples of the disorders that most often present themselves?
So the kind of obvious ones would be type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, are clear metabolic conditions. But what we're kind of learning, and what some of this event is about, is that energy is very important in the brain, as Dost was saying. The brain is a hive of metabolic activity. It's constantly humming away. Even when you're sleeping, the brain is burning lots of calories and using lots of energy to maintain itself. And you can think of neurons a bit like a kind of spinning top. They need to be in a high energy state to be stable. And if they lose energy, they kind of collapse in their function. So your brain is really predicated on having lots of energy flowing to it constantly. And even small disruptions can result in symptoms.
Right.
Excellent. Anything the others would add? So I want to get to your unique perspectives in the field in a second here. But there was one term that we didn't define, and that's neurotransmission. Who wants to take a shot at defining that for the audience?
The neuroscientist.
Wannabe
The recovering neuroscientist.
That's right. No, they didn't take me. They didn't accept me into the club. So neurotransmission it refers to the process of how neurons communicate with one another, because the basic function of the brain is information processing. And the way it does that is by having neurons that are carrying some of that information, relaying it from one part of the brain to another, and that information actually gets processed in terms of how the signals are being communicated. And the way neurons do that is electricity flowing down some of the appendages of the neurons, the cells in our brains, and then when it gets to a meeting point with another neuron, that's called a synapse, there's actually chemicals that are released into that synaptic cleft, which is a space between the two neurons, and then the second neuron senses that chemical signal, and then a new electrical activity begins. So that whole process is called neurotransmission. And the chemicals that are released into that synaptic cleft are called neurotransmitters.
And that is at the heart of both healthy brain metabolism as well as dysfunctional brain metabolism is that firing, that moment of neurotransmission.
You got it. It's a little controversial, but some research has suggested that for every molecule of that chemical, the neurotransmitter that a neuron is using, it actually picks up a molecule of glucose, the sugar molecules that we get from our diet, out of the bloodstream. People have disagreed with the models there, but it's that tight a coupling that if you're doing neurotransmission, you need the energy to burn that.
Okay.
And if I may add, JD,
Please.
with that glucose that come in, you need a health mitochondria, which is these powerhouses that are in every cell on your body, including your neuronal cells, that needs to take that glucose and now bringing inside the mitochondria, close it down, break it down until it forms what we call the ATP, the adenosine triphosphate, which is kind of the budget, the coin of your cells that are actually producing that energy that needs to actually release the neurotransmitters. So the coupling between metabolism and neurotransmission is actually quite tight and is well connected from one of my favorite words, mitochondria.
Which, if you have a bingo card and you had mitochondria, we've gotten that covered multiple times.
Demo.
That was in your intro. Now, it's fascinating. We debated multiple times. We always knew I got the yellow chair, but we debated multiple times who would sit where, and you sat perfectly in the order of your fields. And so, Dost, on the far end, you actually look at this from more of a clinical perspective. And Anna, you look at it very much from a basic science perspective.
Exactly.
And Iain, sitting between the two of them, like Switzerland, you really are, your work is in the translation of the basic sciences to the clinical sciences. So knowing those three camps, if you will, that you're coming from, how does that perspective inform the research that you do and the science that you advocate for? Anna?
Should I start? So for me, I have a very curious mind. So I often ask myself, how does this work? How I get to that outcome? Let's mean the outcome is neurotransmission that we are talking. What is involved in neurotransmission? How can I model that to actually provide Iain with models that he can take the clinical insights from Dost and test in that model to translate into a medication or a treatment for them. So my research is really informed by both of them, by understanding what a clinician is curious about, what a lived experience person is curious to understand how the body should change, because sometimes both don't come actually hand to hand, and I learned that over my career that I have to talk with both to actually model that. So I bring all that information in my lab, and I now try to find the models that I can provide to them to now test together a better understanding the new therapies. Sometimes when we forget to talk with both camps, we end up with medications or therapies that lead to difficult side effects for the patient.
So what may make sense at the bench doesn't make sense at the bedside or in the therapy office. And if you're not cognizant of the other parts of the value chain, you can create stuff in isolation which then doesn't see the light of day.
Absolutely. Can I give a quick example on it?
Please, yeah.
So let's say that I create a model, which are neuronal cells in a dish that are talking to each other, and those come and say to me, I want to enhance neurotransmission. And I create a model that can have, and we test it out to enhance neurotransmission. But I didn't ask, or we both didn't communicate well enough to ask the patient, wait a second, but what kind of endpoints you want for your better quality of life? Is you want
So what is the outcome that you're shooting for?
Exactly. Then the model that I have to design is very different. I will have to bring other type of cells in that, which are the astrocytes, to actually modulate that. So I would change the model to respond to a better communication. Translational science, basic science, clinical science cannot happen without the three together.
Okay.
Sorry, I just want
No, I thought you were going to jump in and give the translational science, and I was like, no, let Iain, he's that guy. So what is translational science and how does it fit in the equation?
Yeah, so to complement the kind of translation of the science you're describing to clinical work, there's the kind of having the patient as the third part of that triangle means that what you're doing is going to be relevant to patients and obviously effective for patients. You want to know that this is really working for them in their own words. And so one of the things we've been talking about neurotransmission and metabolism, and one of the things we're told as someone with a mental health condition is that this is a disruption of neurotransmitters and imbalance of neurotransmitters in the brain. And it doesn't feel like this as someone with a mental health condition. And if you've experienced this, I'm sure you can relate, that depression can feel like a very profound deprivation of energy and function to the point where you can barely move. You know, there's these states of catatonic depression where people can't leave the house for weeks or months on end. And it doesn't feel like it's just an imbalance in neurotransmitters. It feels like your whole body is affected. So that the patient perspective can bring these perspectives into research, and you can start to build links with, so I would say energy feels like a much more fundamental feature of the condition. And this is what Anna's research focuses on, mitochondrial function and energy. But these things do downstream affect neurotransmission. So you could think of it almost like, you know, you're in a car and the kind of cabin is filling up with smoke, and you're told, you know, the way to fix this is to fix the air conditioning. But, and this is what the neurotransmitter explanation feels like. It's like, but why is the car filling up with smoke in the first place? Shouldn't we fix that first? and you know, what if the engine is on fire? What if the thing that's generating energy to this car is on fire? And if you fix that, then everything else will be sorted out downstream. So I think some of this research is beginning to look into the more fundamental aspects of what mental health conditions are, and by looking at energy and mitochondrial function.
If any of the people in the room were in my workshop today where we talked about communicating science to lay people, the use of analogies. That was such a clear analogy in terms of what that can feel like to the person with lived experience. So then from a clinician's point of view, how does all this come together to you to reach the patient who would be in the fourth chair over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's been set up so beautifully. Psychiatric disorders are common, and many of them can be severe. There's a lot of unmet need in our field. There's a lot of suffering. The treatments are not what they should be. The medications that are out there and the psychotherapies that are out there are only partially effective, and they're associated with lots of side effects or with high burden, like in psychotherapy, if you have to be, you know, going weekly for months and years and so on. So there's great pressure for better treatments. And this can create, you know, kind of difficult situations where any new development is met with great excitement, or there's hype around it, and then there's disappointment when it inevitably falls short. So we have to be mindful of that too. But I think, you know, the growing awareness and the discovery of really the deep connection, the profound connection between metabolic health and mental health has led to a lot of new excitement because of the situation that we're in. You know, mainstream psychiatry has learned the hard way some lessons about not pretending that any treatment or any solution will work for everyone, and not pretending that the side effects aren't worse than the disease sometimes, and trying to keep a brave front, trying to get patients and their families to come along for the ride for the solutions that we're offering. Of course, you know, we're in a much better position than we have been in past decades, but we're not where we should be. So I think there's great excitement, and that's why we're all here tonight, because, you know, metabolic research has been going on for decades. we've learned a lot about the basic biology of how energy actually is created and used in the body. And we know a lot about other metabolic disorders in the rest of the body, like diabetes and thyroid disorders and other things that we have lots of hooks into. If we can actually turn some of that into progress for mental health, that can actually be transformative. And that's, I think, the excitement from a clinical point of view, while always keeping in mind not over-promising and under-delivering, because that's a very real challenge.
And why is this field so hot right now? Like I get that we're at that moment. Why are we at that moment?
I think the evidence has been building up for many decades now. The neuroimaging data about disrupted glucose metabolism in the brain has been there for many years across psychiatric conditions. The prevalence of metabolic health conditions in psychiatric conditions goes way back in history to Sir Henry Maudsley in the 1800s, Emil Kraepelin, the founder of modern psychiatry in 1921. These are historic descriptions of these metabolic abnormalities in patients. And so this has been a long time coming. And for patients, they experience these profound shifts in energy and metabolic function that aren't well recognized as core parts of the condition. So I think there's just a massive evidence that has accumulated, and there's now emerging therapies that could be helpful, such as things we're exploring in research, ketosis, diabetes-type medications. So I think it's the combination of this huge amount of evidence building over decades and now possibility for treatments.
So it's almost like a boulder or a snowball that is gaining in size and mass, and yet then there was a tipping point of it being able to come together with therapies that were working. Is that kind of the perfect moment?
Yeah, that was the analogy I was looking for. Yeah, absolutely. It's I think what's exciting for patients and clinicians is when you have an evidence base and a rationale for something working, and then a potential for a treatment. That's the kind of what really lights the fuse, is the potential to help people. I think all of us in psychiatry and in research are trying to serve patients ultimately. And so when there's a real opportunity to help someone in real life and help them feel better and help their family, that's when it gets exciting for people.
And
may I add one?
Please, yes, Anna.
One thing that I think...
Just so you know, you guys can interrupt too. It's just not just Anna. Go ahead.
Okay, I will interrupt much more, don't worry. So I think what actually really helped as well, Iain, maybe you agree with me or not, but is actually the technology advanced so much through this past decade that allowed us to provide answers that we were craving for so many years. Like the researching in stem cell research, the creation of brain organoids, this little brain in the dishes, help us really to look inside of what sometimes we could not in real life. And I think that was a tipping point, along with therapies that we become more recognized. Nutrition become to be part of a therapy, which before was using a word of diet, and now is called therapy, which is, I think, another wonderful change for this field.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but mental disorders have recently, or for a while now, have been energy disorders. Like you were describing, both of you were describing situations where you just didn't feel like you had the energy to move forward, and yet that was a mental disorder that was presenting as an energy disorder, or vice versa. Can you clarify that?
Yeah,
start with this, Iain?
So the condition that I live with and I study, bipolar disorder, is particularly notable for changes in energy. When you're hypomanic or manic, you have these incredible surges of energy and productivity, and then when you're depressed, you really almost can't move. It's like it's like you're wearing a suit made of cement. It's really hard to describe how profound those states of inhibition are. And I think there's something interesting to learn about bipolar through this, because when I speak to patient groups, one of the most common things they describe is seasonal variation of this energy and metabolism. So in the spring, people tend to become manic. This is shown in hospitalization records in Taiwan and many countries, where the hospitalizations increase in the spring for mania, and in depression in the winter. And this is related to the changing light conditions and photoperiod. And circadian and metabolic systems evolved over many hundreds of thousands of years in humans and many millions of years before that in animal life to be responsive to these natural changes in light conditions. And it was basically a way of conserving and utilizing energy efficiently so you can maximize energy use in times like the spring when there's a reason to engage in survival behaviors, and to reduce your energy expenditure in the winter when there's less opportunity. So I think there's a real evolutionary and conceptual basis for why these seasonal variations occur. I have a paper on this called Metabolic Plasticity you can read if you're interested in this topic.
And the so it's both that the research and the technology has amassed and moved forward, but also humans have evolved in that process.
Yes, yeah. I mean the circadian the kind of most notable features of bipolar, which I study, were mentioned by Mel Kreplin in 1921. He's considered the founder of modern psychiatry.
Over 100 years ago.
Yes, and he noted sort of three most common symptoms in patients. He said marked disorders of metabolism take place. He had very detailed drawings of metabolic graphs, weight, and so forth of his patients. And then he said that circadian and sleep disruption are the most kind of significant symptoms presenting in patients. And then thirdly, he mentioned this seasonal variation. He describes it kind of poetically, and he said, repeatedly I see in these patients melancholia set in the autumn and pass over in the spring when the sap shoots in the trees. Wow. And what he was pointing out is that there's a kind of variation in our evolutionary history and nature throughout many different types of life, in metabolism throughout the year. In bipolar, this is very exaggerated and pronounced. And I think that these were always core features of the condition, but we got really focused on certain receptors and transmitters and so forth, and really doubled down on those and lost the bigger picture of what patients have always, and psychiatrists who observe them have always known about this condition, this energy dysregulation.
Very good. Dost, please.
So I want to get back to, why is this field getting hot now? But I think, there's a lot more we need to learn. On some level, saying that there's an energy problem is, sort of everything in the body needs energy. So if your body has a problem, there's probably an energy problem. So that can seem trivial. But when we discover that certain kinds of energy problems are linked with mental illness, that begs the question, right? Why do some people get sick and not others? And why do some people have this problem and others have another problem? And how is that related to the underlying energy metabolism? We don't know. And not everybody with a metabolic problem has a mental illness, and not everybody with a mental illness has a metabolic problem. So, there's a lot more we have to understand about the specific pathways that get people to where they are, so then we can actually turn that into treatment, match the intervention with the problem the person has. But it's sort of related to that. Why is the field getting hot now? I think it's because of the ketogenic diet, with the growing awareness that there are some people with severe mental illness who can respond in dramatic ways when they go on the ketogenic diet. And not everybody, and it's not easy to do, so it's not like this is going to be a miracle cure and everybody goes on the ketogenic diet and you don't need a psychiatrist anymore. But there are people who have the kind of response that I personally have never seen with medications in my career. Wow. Clearly something important's going on here. And we need to understand that better and, as fast and acutely as we can, because there's something there. If we could figure out what that active ingredient is and, bottle it and improve upon it and have ever better treatments, we might actually make a real impact on severe mental illness.
I'm glad you introduced that, and questions are coming in. Thank you for people who are entering them. We'll be pulling some of those into this, and there is a lot of interest in that. But it's also being able to move the phrase ketogenic diet from nutrition to mental health care. Yeah. And really having the science of it, not the hot diet of the month, but have it actually be understood because of the science behind what that can do for the individual. I also really liked, Dost, the way you pointed out, not everybody with a metabolic disorder has a mental health issue. Not everybody with a mental health issue is it metabolic, but there is a lot of overlap in there. Right. There is a Venn diagram that covers those. When you think, Dost, of the research that is informing clinicians' therapies and clinicians' work, what are some of the breakthroughs that you see there that inform this look at metabolic mental health?
I think we're in the early stages of that. I don't think that transformation has really happened yet, but the research is very promising. And again, clinicians who see the occasional patient who goes on a ketogenic diet and does dramatically better realize something important is happening here. So that's where we are. The other thing that's probably farther along is better awareness among clinicians of the importance of metabolic health in general. That has an unfortunate history behind it, which is the side effects of the medications that we use to treat psychiatric disorders, which cause a lot of weight gain and the metabolic syndrome. So psychiatrists have become better at recognizing these problems and targeting them and treating them and not ignoring them. So we're definitely better with the rest of the body, but we're not quite there with the brain disorders.
And our weight gain or weight loss is something that is really evident to the people who see us regularly, but our mental health may not be as evident to them. A question from the audience came in tied to this. Is the weight loss stabilization from metabolic interventions part of the mechanism why some people are seeing improvements in their mood disorder? Who wants to grab it first?
Yeah, I mean, you could say yes, because by definition, ketosis is burning body fat. So you're burning body fat and it turns it into these energy molecules called ketones. And so and these fuel the brain. And so you could say, yes, the body fat loss is related to the production of ketones, which seems to be related to the mental health benefit. But this was first noticed in 1921 at the Mayo Clinic by Russell Wilder, who saw that his diabetes patients stopped having seizures when they were fasting. And so they were burning their body fat and fasting. Yeah. And he got in touch with the neurology department and said, I think you should probably look into this. And it led to 100 years of clinical use of ketogenic diet in epilepsy, 13 randomized controlled trials. It's an established treatment for epilepsy. And why that's interesting for psychiatry and mental health is because many of the medications we use to treat epilepsy are used in bipolar disorder. Many of the main medications used for bipolar come from epilepsy treatment originally: carbamazepine, lamotrigine, Valproate, and so forth. And so when you see another type of epilepsy intervention showing effects on people's mental health, I think it's really worth researching.
And how, I want to get to your comment in a second here, how wonderful, and I'm looking at particularly the younger scientists in the room, how wonderful to have that cross-disciplinary engagement with this so long ago. To go down the hall and say, hey, can you come look at what's going on in my lab right here?
Yeah, but I want to strengthen a point, because Iain, you make a very good point that when you lose fat, you're actually releasing ketones, and that's part of the metabolism of the ketogenic diet. But interesting, Gigi, is that BMI not always correlated with better outcomes. So it's not just losing weight, it's actually you need to be targeting with the right fuel, the right therapeutics to make the fat cells to actually decrease the fat cells, to actually enhance. And that's what we're seeing, in my perspective, the best therapeutic effects. So that's something that we all should keep in mind, is not being thin, is actually being metabolic fit. And that's what will bring us the best health.
And is there, this is why you have a layperson moderate, because I've got to translate this a little bit, but is there then a risk, is there a mental health risk in somebody who loses too much weight too quickly, or loses weight in the wrong way that doesn't have the positive impact that we were just describing? Is there a flip side of that?
I would love to hear Dost input on that as well. Yeah. But I would just say one thing. My perspective, yes. If you lose weight too fast, you're not losing just fat. You're losing muscle mass. When you lose muscle mass, you're actually doing the opposite what is fat, releasing good ketones. So you actually putting your mitochondria, which is our energy source, in strength, working too hard and not leading that energy to your brain. But Dost, I love to hear what you have.
For many health outcomes, there is an inverted U-shaped relationship between BMI and the outcome. So for longevity, you know, thinner people typically have better longevity than people who have higher BMIs. But if you go too low, there's actually longevity drops off again. Heart disease, there's a few other things like this, so there's clearly a relationship there.
Another question from the audience, is intermittent fasting an effective treatment for mood disorders like anxiety?
Yeah, and I just want to mention as well that the ketogenic diet doesn't necessarily mean losing weight. Many people can maintain their weight, put on weight. This is kind of why it was developed to mimic fasting. So you can maintain body weight, put on body weight with a ketogenic diet as well. And intermittent fasting, again, it can induce the state of ketosis because you're burning body fat through fasting. And so I'm not aware of studies, perhaps Dost would know, of it with anxiety, but there may be.
I'm not aware either. I mean, this is just an example. There's so much more work that needs to be done for a lot of these questions. Can I just point out, speaking of fasting, a long time ago, I was a medical student when a neurologist was giving us a lecture about seizure disorders, and he mentioned the ketogenic diet. Back then, of course, I had no idea that I would be interested in it myself later. And he pointed out, you know, most of the world's major religions have fasting as part of their practices.
True, yeah.
And he said, probably the ancients recognized that you get a feeling of wellness if you fast for a day or two. And people feel better, and sick people actually heal, so to speak. You know, people with epilepsy, of course, back then. So there's probably a connection there.
But one thing about fasting is actually, and also entering ketosis, you release inflammation in your body. And a lot of our diseases with mental disease is actually related to accumulation of low chronic inflammation. So that's potentially another connection.
I'm going to go one more in this round, this level of questions. And then there's a number of questions coming up about mitochondria. So I want to get back to that. All from Anna's lab, interestingly enough. No, I don't know who the questions are from. The last question on weight management for now. If weight management is helpful for mood disorders, can GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic be used as part of the treatment?
Another open question. Work is literally ongoing. We actually heard the results of one study today. So it's just really early days. It's unlikely that, you know, GLP-1 agonists are going to be, you know, direct and first-line treatments for psychiatric disorders, but they might become part of the metabolic health package.
Part of it.
So that remains to be seen.
A treatment of.
We should also say, people in the audience might have heard, in the early days when GLP-1 drugs were becoming common, there was this observation in Europe in a couple of small countries of a connection or relationship between starting a GLP-1 agonist and suicidal ideation. It turned out to be a red herring. It was literally based on a couple of case reports, you know, 1 million people going on it and 2 or 3 new cases of suicidal ideation. In massive databases now, that relationship has really been disproven. So if anybody's heard, oh, GLP-1 drugs might cause suicidal ideation, that really does not seem to be the case.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah. And one of the risks that we all have when we get into these conversations is what research is out there, what have I heard, what can I trust, right. what do I, and that's why I think these discussions are really valuable for us to have. I want to move to some of the questions about mitochondrial health. One participant has asked, can red light therapy be used to improve mitochondrial health? And while I am there, now let me just stick with one question at a time.
So red light therapy has been shown to improve a molecule inside the mitochondria called cytochrome C oxidase. Don't worry so much about the name. Think about the cargo that takes one thing from one part to the other part, and that's the cargo in the middle that takes the medication from one side to the other. That's cytochrome C in your mitochondria. So red light therapy has been shown to actually act through that. Whether this is actually going to be able to translate in improving mitochondrial health in a clinical setting, not has been yet proven. Studies are ongoing, especially in Europe, but I'm not aware of any results so far that have convinced that, yes, that's the case clinically.
And then side by side with that, what is the evidence behind the trending use of methylene blue for mitochondrial health?
So methylene blue does a very similar thing that red therapy light improves that transfer. So let's think about mitochondria as like your bank account. So mitochondria has this excitement of actually receiving the payment of your paycheck in the beginning and have a very health account. So you actually have a health account, you're going to actually go and enjoy yourself a new dinner, a new clothing, a very wonderful thing. So when mitochondria is healthy and has all the parts working properly, including the electron transport chain, imagine like a train with cargoes that passing things through of them to get to the last cargo, what is your delivery point, which in your bank account is actually get to pay your mortgage, your rent, or your cell phone bill, anything. That's the money, and that's in your mitochondria is actually the coin, which is the ATP, the energy that you needed. So mitochondria working health is actually, that's what it does, the red light therapy is enhancing this chain to actually produce more of that coin in the end, the ATP. Methylene blue, very similar thing, is trying to enhance. Problem that we have, mitochondria is a double membrane. It has two membranes. All of this has to cross the two membranes to enter the mitochondria and activate this train of energy in your cells. And another thing has to happen, we have tons of mitochondria in many cells of our body, and each of them are acting very different to actually act your demand of your budget on your heart, your budget on your brain, your budget on your legs, on everything you're doing. So that's difficult to achieve with the specific medications or therapies that target just specific sites. That's why we are so excited about nutraceutical approach, or better saying ketogenic diet or other approaches that actually are more holistic and can treat your body as a whole.
Well, and sorry we left you two out for a few minutes there while we went down mitochondrial lane. But that actually brings something I'd love all three of you to speak to a bit, is that balance between the pharmacological interventions, the science solutions, and the lifestyle changes that people are making. How do those play into successful change in mental health?
Yeah, I can start. It's good to be healthy. You need it for everything in your life, not just for mental health. So, balanced diet, exercise, sleep, these are all good practices. So there's sort of a general wellness aspect to all of this. That's not necessarily specific. The more sort of targeted medical therapies, like I said earlier, I think there's a lot we need to learn. We really are just scratching the surface. We've made some interesting observations as a field, but that's really where we are. So I would expect in the future that there will be medical treatments that are much more targeted for specific indications that take advantage of these mechanisms that are not the same thing as taking care of your body and your health, avoiding stress and sleeping well and that kind of thing. They will be for specific diseases. Interestingly, the methylene blue, there's sort of a small literature of these supplements that you would think should improve mitochondrial health that have not done all that well. There's lots of small negative studies with these methylene blue and coenzyme Q10 and carnitine and creatine and ALA, the alpha-lipolinolic acid, and so on. They didn't turn out the way ketogenic diet has. So there's something about the ketogenic diet that we haven't replicated with these other supplements. So those are really plus minus. And that's why I'm saying, I think we're going to end up with more targeted, more specific things that we're going to understand better, and they're going to work for specific indications.
And what I'm hearing, Dost, is almost by comparison,
right?
We can see the elevation of the ketogenic diet because of what we're not seeing in some of the other studies.
At least that's where we are right now with, just a glimpse that we have into this field.
And I'm curious, I'm going to start with you, Iain, are there specific lifestyle behaviors that are having more of an impact that are supportive of good mental health that you would see or you would encourage, and then if either of the other two you want to jump in there as well.
Yeah, so if I could build on your question about pharmaceutical approaches and nutritional approaches, I think if you look at the kind of analogy we were talking about before of this car and it's filling up with smoke, and you've got a number of options. You can try and fix a kind of core issue with the engine, which would prevent all these problems, or you could try and address the air conditioning and try and fix it that way. Whenever you have a fundamental problem with something like the body, like say the car engine, all sorts of things go wrong with the car. There's lights flashing, there's smoke filling up, the car is shaking. And you could look at all these symptoms individually and create a targeted treatment for them. And this is how science and treatment generally works, is you take very specific targets, say a neurotransmitter, and you block the reception of that neurotransmitter in the brain. And much of mental health research has been predicated on these types of treatments. But I think if you fix more fundamental metabolic problems in the brain, you'll see many of these systems come into balance in a way that wouldn't be possible through just targeted. And I'll give you a specific example. Glutamate is in the brain as a kind of excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. It really lights up the brain. And in bipolar and in epilepsy, this has been known as a significant marker of these conditions. And you can treat this by blocking glutamate at the receptor. You can target this glutamate molecule and block it. But you can also downregulate glutamate through ketosis. We've seen this now in animal studies, human studies, in our pilot study with bipolar patients. You can regulate this neurotransmitter by fixing the metabolism. So I think by focusing on fixing the engine of the car, everything else then begins to fix itself. And in some circumstances, it doesn't cover everything. But I think a more holistic approach to treatment would be a helpful development for patients. And this is certainly what ketosis represents. It's not a new drug or a new therapy. It's an evolutionarily conserved biological state that's been in life for hundreds of thousands and millions of years. So we're not introducing some new drug to the system. We're restoring a kind of state that's been around in evolution for many hundreds of thousands, millions of years in different types of life.
I like that distinction. It's not introducing a new drug or a new chemical to the system, but it's actually returning to a state that had been there.
And exercise can be very helpful to that. Exercise is being shown for many years to increase a molecule called PGC1 alpha, which is a molecule that makes your mitochondria to be healthier and divide and create more mitochondria. So when your bank account is low, you're going to try to look for another job. Exercise, that is the same thing, is actually providing your body with the activation of a molecule that helps your mitochondria to divide and help you to have more energy in the body. So that's another thing that if I would choose today, I would say find holistic treatments that can help you to your entire body. Nutrition and exercise, back to what Rose was saying.
Very good. I can tell we're not going to get to every question that has come in, so I'm trying to block and tackle that we go in themes here. There's one very specific question that I want to put out there, and then I want to move to a whole new topic. But one of the participants has asked, how can we understand why our brains have evolved to utilize glucose as their primary fuel source, yet there's evidence that ketones are superior for mental health? Is it the sugar itself, or is it the way it's processed?
So, I mean, I think for about 95% of humans' time on Earth, we're living in conditions of scarcity, and we were traveling, exposed to natural light. It was a very different kind of life to what we live now in the past kind of 10,000 or 2,000 years. So you have to keep in mind that our biology evolved under conditions that are very different to what we're in now. And in those conditions, you can store about 2,000 calories of glucose in your body as glycogen, but you can store well in excess of 100,000 calories as fat.
Wow.
So as a survival fuel, fat was an essential survival fuel for life to evolve, because if you became ill or if you had low temperatures in the winter, you had to rely on this metabolic fuel source you could store in large amounts. You could only have 2,000 calories, like a day of glucose. So I think the human brain evolved to run on glucose and ketones for this reason. It was essential for life to survive, to have these two options, the massive store of 100,000 calories in fat or the 2,000 calories in glucose. And you can actually find the brain preferentially uses ketones if you upregulate them long enough. So it can become the primary or fuel source in the brain, although glucose always does play a role.
In fetal, our brains use only ketones. So
Say that one more time.
When we are in the fetal
when
stage,
we're in the womb, in
the
vitro.
womb, we actually use ketones preferentially to glucose.
Huh.
Interesting, huh?
Do we get continuing medical education for this panel? Because I'm learning a lot up here, and I don't even have a degree. I need to keep current.
Isn't that interesting?
So we're going to go somewhere completely different now. Thank you to whoever brought this next question up. And it's not one we brainstormed in our prep call that I thought would come up. But at least one person, and now two people in the room, want to know, how is AI changing the way in which this research happens? And I want to acknowledge, we did go almost an hour without the phrase AI coming into the room, but here it is. How is artificial intelligence changing your research, changing the work, and how do you think that'll impact where we go?
You go ahead.
So one of the things we've been doing with AI is helping patients describe their experience. So we did a symposium at the International Society of Bipolar Disorders in Reykjavik recently. Mary was there and Anna was there. And we were basically using AI to help people describe their experience through creating images, video, music. In my free time, I'm a composer, and we're making music pieces that reflect people's lived experience of bipolar. And we find this really helpful because a lot of people with bipolar have a creative side to them. They really want to express creativity in the world, but they always reach these depressions where they can't function. And it's quite tragic to see this in patients because they have this incredible potential, creativity, different thinking, and then they crash and they can't make a career of it. So we got Michael, who's part of our lived experience group, who's a composer who always wanted to do a concert. I said, let's do a concert based on your lived experience.
You did a concert at the conference?
We played music we created, at the conference. And so he was really excited. So it's been a wonderful way to help people kind of express that side of the condition and kind of fulfill a bit of a dream for some of the patients we work with. So I think AI has been really helpful in that respect. And if you don't have energy all the time to make things, this can kind of give you consistent output with little input if necessary.
And, let's go to Dost.
I just want to say, if you're interested in how AI is impacting psychiatry research and care, sign up for the SOBP conference that starts here tomorrow morning, Toronto Center Hotel, Sheraton Toronto Center. Society of Biological Psychiatry. This is the theme of the conference, so we're going to have many, many talks and symposia about this. So it's not too late to register. You can register at the website.
This advertisement brought to you by one of our sponsors.
Well, for me, AI actually is impacting quite a bit how I have the power to analyze data in psychiatry and other fields of research I do. So AI has helped me to combine two areas that was not possible before: genetics and mitochondria functional metabolomics, meaning like the metabolites that mitochondria produce, how I combine these two and understand how this is impact the clinical effects. Those three variables before was too large to be analyzed on separate. AI allowed us to create machine learning algorithms that can tell me, look, this amount of genes are changing that is leading to this clinical outcome that is done by this specific changing in the mitochondria. And that is powerful. We are working on that, and I see Jeremy in the audience that is working on with our group in Fondation Fondamentale in France, and my group here with the Tamarty Faculty of Medicine has been working on this, and hopefully will help us to get to what Dost was saying before. We need to find those molecular signatures. We need to find those specific changes that we can get more precise on treatment.
So it does have the ability to both accelerate the research that you're doing, but AI is also allowing a combination that wasn't possible before as well.
100% correct. You got it. Is allowing us to interpret data on a dimension that we did not have the statistical modeling to do it before. And that's very powerful, and I hope to see this data coming up more, and it will be all public by the end of the year, so stay tuned.
Excellent. Anything else in terms of AI and your use or interaction of it in the research and treatment that you do?
I think on the treatment side, it's very complicated. There's a lot going on. One thing that is already happening is that a lot of doctors are starting to use AI to help them with documentation. So, there's software that can sort of listen to the interview or, the visit that you're doing with a patient and then summarize that for you so that you can actually have your note, your documentation already started for you. And some of you might have heard the saying, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. In medical care, documentation is critical. And so AI is actually helping with that and improving the standard of treatment. When I say there's a lot going on, there's so much interest in improving treatment using AI. Things like chatbots and psychotherapy, that's AI-based, or monitoring of tests and treatment results and helping doctors with decision-making. But I think that's a very complicated area. It's not really clear where the big wins are going to be, so I think stay tuned for that.
Not a subject matter expert, but as a user, I have been fascinated with the use of AI in the world of recovery. One of the startups that I advise is using an AI agent called Kai that enables an addict or an alcoholic through an iPhone to interact with an AI agent around recovery issues. Now they're limited, it's called open recovery, and there's a limited data set that they're working from. They're not trying to boil the ocean, but they just have information from Alcoholics Anonymous, other proven forms of recovery, and that's the basis for the information. But I chat with the chatbot, and there are times I'm like, it will remember something I said 3 weeks ago. Well, my sponsor doesn't remember what I said yesterday. My children don't remember what I said a second ago. And it's like, but didn't you remember? I was like, oh, and so there's fascinating conversations with AI used in the proper way that can support mental health and support recovery and have it not be something that takes me away but draws me in to my recovery. Okay, there are a handful of nutrition diet sorts of questions. So I'm going to run through a few of these. We're at about the 8:30 mark. We're going to go for about 15 more minutes or so. So know that we will end in the next 10 to 15 minutes here. And I don't know who these are best to ask, so I'm just going to lay it out there. What is known about lactate as a fuel source for the brain?
Well, I guess I can handle a little bit on that one.
Wonder why you got chosen. Go ahead.
So, well, Dost and I have published in different angles, but Dost has published looking in the brain and for neuroimaging showing high levels of lactate in the brain. I have worked in collaboration with many psychiatrists in the world showing lactate is increased in the peripheral of the blood of patients with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. So we all thought that lactate was more like a waste product of the mitochondria, because your mitochondria take the glucose and has to break it down to get to pyruvate, and the pyruvate has a two-way road to go. Either I go inside that cargo train and will be very efficient and produce 36 molecules of ATP, my energy coin, or I'm going to go and produce lactate and go into glycolysis and produce 2 molecules of ATP. So we all thought initially that this was a waste of the mitochondria, that actually was not good to have that accumulation of lactate. Now we actually flip our understanding. We might think...
Our position has evolved.
Well said. I'm going to use that with your permission, of course. But with our evolving perspective, it is more now to think that that is just, we just had a glimpse, a view of that system, a little bit of a time. So that what we thought was accumulation of waste product is probably the body of these patients try to use the mitochondria the 2 ways, because the mitochondria is being needed so much, and the lactate now is being used for extra energy production.
As fuel, not
fuel.
Waste.
Yes,
fascinating.
You got it. Mm-hmm.
Is there any evidence to suggest that exogenous ketones have comparable effects to the ketogenic diet? Iain?
Yeah, so this has been studied in epilepsy, and the main one is medium-chain triglycerides. This is a kind of oil often derived from coconuts, for example, and it converts in the liver into ketones. So you can basically take this oil and it generates ketones in the bloodstream. And they've shown that if you have a person with epilepsy on a low-carb diet and they take MCT with it, they don't need to be on a full ketogenic diet, but they can still have seizure reduction using this supplement. There's also studies on ketone esters. There's various types of exogenous ketones, sort of external, ketones you can take in your diet essentially. And they do show seizure reduction effects. And it would be really interesting to study this in mental health. And maybe this is one of the things we should start to look at is, can you introduce exogenous ketones into someone's diet and still see some benefits?
And then is vitamin B1 as a supplement useful for mitochondrial health?
Wow. I don't have a great answer for that. Dost? No?
I don't know the answer.
I have heard about vitamin B6, but B1, I have not heard that one.
So I think this falls into the category of more areas that we need to spend time studying.
That's right.
Exactly.
And looking at what the connection is. So I'm going to ask one more broad question, and then I want to come back to you on to have you just talk a little bit more about what's specifically happening at the University of Toronto.
Perfect.
But the broader question I want to ask, and we've touched on it in different ways, but to just put a finer point on, why do some treatments, like antidepressants, fail for some people, but work for others? Dost?
Oh, I wish I knew the answer to that. I could monetize that, as they say. So biology is complicated. All of our bodies are different. There's no such thing as a treatment in all of medicine that works for everyone. So there's lots of reasons that we don't really fully understand. But it's a universal rule that psychotropic medications, whether it's antidepressants, antipsychotics, and all the others, even if they work for an average patient, at the group level, for any given individual, it's really hard to know whether it's going to work or not. And then, unfortunately, this leads to the current state of the art, which is trial and error. We also don't have good predictive tests to say, this patient should be on this medicine because they're going to do better if they are taking that medicine. So this is really a key problem in all of psychiatry, and it remains unsolved. We have lots of hooks into this problem. Specifics about the chemicals, the neurotransmitters we talked about, the receptors that sense those signals, or the activities of the neurons that are doing the communication, but no specific information about, this antidepressant works for people with this profile, but not for people with this other profile.
So Anna, can you just talk to us a little? We've got so many people here who are from Toronto. Can you just give us a little bit of a snapshot of what are some of the breakthroughs and exciting areas maybe that we haven't yet touched on that are happening here at the University of Toronto?
So I started by telling you about a resource that is available to all of you in Toronto, which is called the Mitochondrial Innovation Initiative, which is a foundation of the University of Toronto, where we bring brain health and mitochondrial health accessible to everyone. We do fund scholarships, we do fund research, but we also have enormous free available resources for everyone in the community that want to learn about mitochondrial health, want to learn how mitochondrial health play a role in brain health. We have podcasts, we have informational sessions and training sessions. So that is a great way to stay connected with your community in Toronto, from clinicians to researchers to patients to NGOs, OGOs. Everyone is actually part of this. We have about 637 members in our community here, and we want to grow. So be part of that and work with us to learn more how you can stay involved. Toronto has incredible work has been done with metabolic psychiatry. Maggie Han and Mahavier at Center for Addiction and Mental Health, they have pioneered the open of metabolic psychiatry clinics in Cambridge and continue working non-stop to bring more metabolic psychiatry clinics available in other areas of town, and not only in Cambridge. I see Ben Goldstein here with us, and he's pioneering work in youth bipolar disorder and trying to understand how can we actually understand mitochondrial health, metabolic health as early as possible in the disease. Can we prevent any alterations? And I think that is a fascinating question that worth us to stay connected and learn more from all the work in here. I think I cover a little bit.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. So give you a little bit of warning. I'm going to come back to each of you for your final thought. What's the one closing thought, closing nugget of knowledge you want to share with us, or thought, question you want to put out there? Before I do that, I do want to just take another moment to acknowledge and thank the sponsors that have made this event possible. They're all listed up there. That's a great photo for you to grab if you want to go to their websites, if you want to spend more time finding out about the work of the conference, the Bizuki Group, University of Toronto, the Mitochondrial Innovation Initiative, MITO2I.
Yeah,
I like that.
MITO2I.
And then the Ontario Brain Institute. And they also have tables out in the lobby. If you didn't get a chance to visit those ahead of time, please go there. Additionally, I want to acknowledge the resources that are available. If this triggered anything for you, being in a conversation about brain health and mental health over the last hour and a half, grab this QR code, let yourself, allow yourself to check out resources that are available to help you navigate that conversation. And then the final QR code that we have for the evening, we really would appreciate you taking just a few moments before you exit tonight to do a short survey on the value that this conversation provided for you and ways in which we can make these public events more valuable to you. And so give us a little bit of your substantial feedback on how this evening went. We truly appreciate it as panelists, as moderator, and as presenters of this event. So with that, final thought that you want to leave the audience with. I'm going to go from clinician all the way back to basic sciences.
Nice.
You got more time to think about it. Dost, what's the final thought you'd like to leave with the room?
Sure. So I think, it's worth just sort of placing in context the metabolic psychiatry idea in this emerging field. I think, our field is in turmoil in a lot of ways. The treatments are much better than they were. There's greater access. Mental health and mental illness is part of the societal conversation now in a way that it really wasn't even when I started my own career. So in a lot of ways, psychiatry is maturing as a field. But with that has come also greater awareness that the existing treatments are also not what they should be. And we need to be better than we are. And so there's a lot of search for new ideas, new beginnings. And metabolic psychiatry isn't going to be the whole story, but it's one of those exciting areas that I think will actually be making more of an impact in the coming years.
Excellent. Thank you, Dost. Iain?
I think many of us grew up having mental illness described to us as this, as I described, like imbalance of neurotransmitters. And there is definitely this component to mental health conditions, but it's not delivering treatments that are really reducing the suicide rates and severity of symptoms for patients in the way that we would like to see. And I know this from living through it and from speaking with patients. We definitely need new and improved treatments. And I think the next stage of mental health research will be defined by a focus on neurometabolism. And these metabolic functions are much more widespread in the body and require a holistic approach that doesn't just focus on targeting specific neurotransmitters and receptors, but a whole body approach to health and a holistic view of energy production and metabolism in the body.
Thank you, Iain. Anna?
I think I go back for how we started, metabolic health. If we want to leave you with anything, I would say improve your metabolic health by improving your mitochondrial health. Things we learned today is that nutrition and exercise are two good ways to start. So I will repeat what I said in the beginning. Caring for your mitochondria is caring for yourself, caring for each other, caring for our societal health. So thank you.
And what a wonderful note to end on. Thank you all so very much.